Hello and welcome to Next 2.0 on WQLN NPR. Next is produced by the Public's Voice Media. I am your host, Marcus Atkinson, with my guest host, Mark Blunt. If you want to know more about Next 2.0, you can go to Facebook, like the page. You can follow us on Instagram at Next 2.0 Erie. There you can keep up with upcoming show promos, events, and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. P. Diddy's homes have been raided. Before I go into the nuts and bolts of this is obviously a continuation of a conversation that myself, Mark, and Vanessa Bellin had about P. Diddy and Cassie, because some of the allegations in Cassie's legal document, and I want to say it was Vanessa that said it on the air at the time, if some of this stuff is true, some of these things fall into the realm of crimes. Yeah. And when and where does the police get involved with this? And it was an interesting and fair question. And now here we are. Now, mind you, this whole episode will lean into the term allegedly, because that's exactly what it is. All of it is innocent until proven guilty. But to have, the feds descend upon his properties with such force, like El Chapo was being brought down, was intimidating to watch, let alone being on the receiving end. I especially feel bad for his children who, from what I understand, were cuffed.
They were cuffed.
And everything else. And so traumatizing experience, but we are also mindful of the fact that regardless of who did what, how, when, where, and why, there are some people filing complaints that have been traumatized in their own way. And the law, hopefully, will figure all of these things out and disseminate fact from fiction, and all of these things can be accounted for properly. But Mark, just give me your general reaction, bro. When it went down, your thoughts were what?
I'm gonna remix this a little bit. My initial thought was Michael Jackson, because when I saw Neverland rated the way that it was, the backdrop is R. Kelly and Bill Cosby. And it's all like mixed in here. This is the era that we're in. And you kind of like was expecting this once Cassidy said what she said, because basically the reason that was filed, the way that she filed it, was there was a veiled threat of, well, whatever happened to me was criminal, and this is the last date that I could file versus statute of limitations. That was the issue. The statute of limitation, I believe it was a New York law, and it was about to hit that statute of limitation, and Cassie made her move. So based off of that, the clock to me was ticking. Once either you believe what Cassie said or you heard what Cassie said, I believe the clock was ticking from there.
And so give me the barbershop talk or the family talk that you've been hearing, man. Whether it's at your job or, some of the places you've been hanging at, the cigar lounge, whatever. Give me the prevailing thought that you're hearing from folks in your atmosphere.
Well, to me, people like a car wreck. They like a train wreck. They like to look at it, and we like drama. And at first, the internet is undefeated. Some of these memes out here with Puffy or what have you, the excitement or the creativity that they're using, the jokes about a serious matter is like crazy out there. But going back to your question, again, we're in the backdrop of R. Kelly and Bill Cosby. So we're dealing with a serious issue. We're dealing with a generation where you got videotapes of Aaron Hall saying what he was doing with when he would invite Puffy upstairs see what he was doing.
He sure did.
And what we were termed things like, I guess we would use the word back in the day, groupies. And you knew what a groupie was, and you knew what was going on. Now that seems to be criminal as we look back. Mm-hmm. And there's some responsibility now on the artist of what you was doing with that groupie. And now there's some liability here. And these people, I'm not calling Cassie a groupie, but Cassie was with Puffy for a reason. And it just wasn't that she liked his looks or what have you. She was there. He was part of the entertainment business. He was a star. He was someone with power that she wanted to know and be around. So this is what happens when you do that. But Puffy's white parties, where we always wanted to know what went on behind closed doors.
I
you was
guess
hearing
we know
this.
now.
And we got to tie Cat Williams into this a little bit, where he says, you just got to tell Puffy no. And people took that literally.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, you just, if Cat was not performing and he was telling the truth, those words echo now. I hear, when I think about Puffy, you have to tell him no.
If you don't know who Aaron Hall is, there was a group back in the day called Guy. And Aaron Hall, Damon Hall, his brother, and Teddy Riley. And so, boy, what is it? All I want to do, rumor, zoom, zoom.
Zoom, zoom.
What was that song called?
In your boom, boom.
Yeah. You may know Teddy Riley best.
Rum shake.
There it is. You may know Teddy Riley best by that, from that particular group. But when he first came out with Guy, Aaron Hall was the lead singer. And what's interesting about that, like Mark pointed out, he's running around bragging about what he's doing with these women sexually, and P. Diddy's calling him in the room. And I remember the accounts about Cassie wearing the white nails, Lori Harvey when she was rocking the white nails, and what Cassie said was that P. Diddy enjoyed the contrast of those white nails against the dark skin of the male, I don't know if they're escorts or the male sexual partners that she had, who all of which were supposedly well endowed. Now, enter Aaron Hall, who is an extremely dark-skinned dude who's on there bragging about how well endowed he is, and he's doing whatever he's doing with these women. He's inviting Diddy into the room. And so those narratives, it's funny, if you listen to something long enough, I'm always trying to see which narratives fit together. Like, okay, you start piecing together that account. All right, that and that fits. This and that fits. And one of the things that I'm hearing from a lot of these different people on interviews is everybody ain't lying. I do believe in that no matter who it is.
Yes. Too
many people come with the same narrative. It's like, okay, all these people didn't get together and orchestrate the lie. But this thing, when it was reported, you had the ATF. The ATF converge on P. Diddy's properties in Los Angeles and Miami, and they are looking into him for allegedly sex trafficking. We talked before we were on the air, Mark, about that term, sex trafficking, and you said something I thought was poignant. We need a working definition of what we mean when we say sex trafficking, because for some people, what comes to their mind is some little kid or some woman from wherever that's been kidnapped, and he or male, and they're doing something against their will. Unpack why you were thinking, all right, we need context to this term.
From what I'm hearing, I was thrown off a little bit because who I heard led this thing was Homeland Security.
And there it is, not ATF, Homeland Security, that correction.
And when Homeland Security was there, most people think of like terrorist type situations.
Right.
But you have to know it was Homeland Security also behind R. Kelly, and one of their things is sex trafficking, because their reach is farther than what the domestic people that work with domestic cases is, because they could go international. They could go to Mexico or South America and then just as well as act in the States. Well, a lot of people, when you hear sex trafficking, you're thinking about something like the movie Taken, or you're seeing somebody kidnapped and you're thinking that they're being exploited after they were kidnapped and put into this life, or brothels or something like that. Well, that's part of it. That's the known part of it. But the one that I guess they're trying to get Puffy with is for hiring sex workers. And if he hired sex workers, they're saying that he participated in sex trafficking.
Right.
He had someone hire a sex worker. And so if he had someone hire a sex worker, they're saying that's a conspiracy. And at these parties, they're saying it was the after party. And you have a lot of lawsuits going on right now, and they are going off of the testimonies or the statements of these people. Understand this. To get a warrant with the feds, you have to have something, and someone was in that house recently, and then when they go in for that, they was looking for quote unquote guns, or they was looking for the videos of what went on. That's part of the lawsuits. Now I'm even hearing young Miami.
Young Miami.
Young Miami. She's part of this now, and may be indicted on this thing, because that's what we got to wait for, because as Marcus said, it's all alleged right now.
Right.
So whatever they heard to get this, because they say the feds is 95%. When they have 95% conviction rate. So they didn't move off of just drawing Puffy's name out the hat. Somebody said something very specific, and they went in looking for it.
Right.
So we'll see if they got it.
I'm going to read a couple of comments from some of the people from Facebook. Michael Baisden, who is one of the most popular African-American radio hosts, asked people point blank, what did you think? And there were thousands of comments. And so I thought, instead of posting something myself, I'll post some of these comments, because you hear the same things here locally, and some of these people are local. Just to kind of set the tone for something Mark has already alluded to, and then we've already said that this was alleged. Terry Williams says, innocent until proven guilty. They did this to Michael Jackson and Bill Cosby, and despite statutes of limitations being over and no evidence except word of mouth, Bill Cosby went to prison. They found no evidence at Michael's ranch, and despite the trial, he was found innocent, but he was never the same after, and later was killed by an overdose of medication. Diddy houses were raided, but so far no arrests and no evidence. We have to wait to see if any evidence or arrests happen. There are plenty of bigger people doing worse in Hollywood, but it seems only the black ones are being targeted and prosecuted. And so first, my mind does go. Now, I'm going to read something later to that point, but my mind does go to, the Weinsteins and people along those lines that have been hit for Me Too issues and things along those lines. But let's go back to the sex trafficking and the sex worker thing, because I'm watching a documentary about a lady who is a dominatrix and a stripper. And when she was referred to as a stripper, and she said, well, we prefer the term sex worker, nowadays. And sex work is honorable work. It's honest work. Let me say it like that. And so if someone, so strippers, quote unquote, are sex workers.
Yes.
You talk about Young Miami, for example. I mean, I'm hearing some of these people that are adults.
Yes.
2, consenting. Something. Are we putting the sex trafficking title on them? Because if you're an adult and you're consenting and you're being paid to do these sex acts for other people to watch and enjoy for their pleasure, I don't, and this is where the broad definition of, sex trafficking, they really need to parse that out, because I'm assuming that for the average American, the worst images come to mind when you start talking about sex trafficking.
Well, the innuendo also, which adds another layer to Puffy, is perhaps he may be bisexual or something like this, because now there's a leak about him and Meek Mills, and it doesn't look good or sound good. I don't know if it's Meek or not, or Puffy or not. And then you have a disgruntled bodyguard, and that was the same thing with Michael Jackson. You have a disgruntled bodyguard that he's giving you behind the scenes of his version of what's going on. Now, also keep in mind, folks, Keefe D is out here, and Keefe D alleged that Sean Puffy Combs gave him $1 million on Tupac.
Clarify who Keefe D is.
He was either a gang affiliated person in, I believe, L.A., and he was one of those type guys that involved himself in violence, perhaps. And now he is charged. Keefe D is the one charged right now for the murder of Tupac as we speak, and he brought Puffy's name into this. Mm-hmm. So you have all those layers to this thing now, and you could say maybe the FBI or whoever is throwing spaghetti on the wall to say, hey, one of these things is going to stick. But it's just so complicated in these things that you just don't know. Mm-hmm. And especially in this era of social media.
Yeah.
Because if there are tapes like the R. Kelly thing, that's what they was really going in there looking for. They're looking for security camera coverage. They're saying these things was on tapes. That was R. Kelly's downfall.
That was true.
Was these tapes. And if Cassie said there are tapes.
Yeah, I believe that.
They're looking for.
You know what? And the one thing I do believe is, just like Epstein Island had cameras in every room, that I'm inclined to believe.
Yep.
Because you have them. I mean, that is nothing for your level of financial your level of financial interest period, or your level of financial prowess, for you to have cameras installed throughout an entire property is nothing. And listen, it's not a crime to be a voyeur or a cuckold, all these different things. You like to watch, that's your business. Now, watching people in an unconsenting situation where they're being filmed against their knowledge is a whole different conversation. But when they talk about, there was cameras and he was using those to blackmail, the camera part is extremely believable. How that was playing out is another thing. Let me go back to your point about supposedly P. Diddy is homosexual and that hadn't come out and things along those lines. I'm going to play an audio clip from a mainstream news source, right? And it's this type of thing. And this is just one example that I believe is problematic for P. Diddy.
I know this man well enough to call him and say, hey, I need a favor. Yeah. And this might have been 10, 12 years ago that I called him and say, hey, I have a family member who I want you to hire them as an intern. Yeah. And I have never talked about this publicly. And he said yes. And they were flying around, one of the interns, Atlanta, Miami, whatever, on the jet, in the house, whatever. And then the internship stopped abruptly, like 3 or 4 months into it. Yeah. And I spoke to my family member, like, well, what happened? And they wouldn't say. Yeah. And I'm like, why did it end? And he wouldn't say. And years later, they finally came out, and this is a male, and said that Puff had said, come home, stay the night with me, or the internship is over. And they said, absolutely not. He said, absolutely not. And the internship ended. But from there, I was like, this is how it goes. Okay. Yeah.
And so that was the writer Torre. And I don't know if you're familiar with him. Very natural hairstyle, bright-skinned brother, sharp, intelligent guy. Now, he has been a mainstream writer for years. This is not some underground hip-hop writer. I want you to understand that is him talking to Joy Holmes, I want to say, on MSNBC, okay? He is on an MSNBC interview saying that. And so here you have a mainstream journalist on a mainstream show, a mainstream news source, telling his truth, so much so, and the relative he's talking about is male. He made that clear. He is obviously not concerned about being sued because he's saying it on an MSNBC interview. Yep. These are the kinds of narratives and the kinds of accounts that I think are going to bring him the most issues going forward, because it's one thing to have these. So like you bring up Meek Mills. There's a huge demographic out there that has no idea who you're talking about. Yes. And there's people listening to this right now like, who? Meek who? Yeah. But once you start crossing over into the mainstream, you've got what's my brother's name that used to be on he Stomp the Yard, and then Columbus Short. Yes. Just saw one with Columbus Short the other day, where Puff was trying to get him to the hotel in the middle of the night, 2:00 in the morning, called this man. He said had to put it on speakerphone because his wife was laying next to him, and he wanted to think something shady was going on. And, I'm at the hotel, man, that's who all is there? Me. He trying to get him to the hotel. And so it's these mainstream accounts combined with all of these underground accounts that I think ultimately it will be problematic for this brother.
And you got to go with, now they're saying he may have groomed Usher. Yeah. And Usher is talking about these parties now. They're talking about Justin Bieber. Mm-hmm. You have several layers to this thing. And now also it's really going to hit the fan if you're talking about bringing Kim Porter in here, who might have died under mysterious circumstances. Mm-hmm. And there's, conspiracy people are out there saying that Puffy might have had something to do with it. I don't know. I always thought she might have had COVID before it was called COVID. But you have a lot of people that if you hear a call for her to be exhumed, I think what that is going to be about. Mm-hmm. He even with Puffy, it's just been a bad year because, hey, they connected him with Jamie Foxx for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. It was like, did Puffy do something to Jamie? Did he do something to Al B? Sure. So these type of things seem to be following him for whatever reason at a time where, hey, I guess he had gave the rights back to a lot of his artists, and he gave $1 million check to Jackson State University, and Puffy had done a lot of things. But I wanted to say this though: when we start talking the sex trafficking thing, I will say the way that they're going about this, Robert Kraft was raided. Robert Kraft is the owner of the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
He got charged for the sex trafficking.
He did.
And it goes away.
He did.
I mean, he's still the owner. he's still a very wealthy man. So worst case scenario, I guess best case scenario in Puffy's case, because he don't want to be charged, would be, I think he's going to be embarrassed, but is it wrong to be, I mean, he's enjoying life. He's being sexual with consenting adults. If that's the worst thing that it is versus a criminal act, or is this a play for money now? Because you have to say, why did Cassie wait so long? Why did some of these people, and that's always the question. That's the difficulty of these things, these whole things where, why did you wait so long? And after the first time, I'm not understanding why you go back to these people. And that's what confuses most people. I guess I can't say that now, or I shouldn't say that now. But to me, that's the obvious. Why did you go back? If this was this horrible person, horrible, why did you go back? I say that with Cosby. A lot of these people that Cosby was convicted of, these people came back and borrowed money from him.
Yeah, they did.
They took money from him. So sometimes I look at this and I don't know, man. It just don't pass the smell test sometimes.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. So a couple of things that Mark said. The Justin Bieber allegations and the Usher Raymond allegations have been out there for a minute or two. There's no statute of limitation on child molestation or child endangerment. And so even if there are some accounts from situations like that, if there's hard evidence presented, doesn't matter how long ago it was, that will be an issue for them. But I remember Ed Lover that used to be on used to be on MTV, right? Ed Lover was in an interview, and you can look this up. He did not hide it. He says he remembers years ago when Diddy had custody. He had legal custody of Usher. When Diddy had custody of Usher, he remembers seeing Diddy at the club, and he'll never forget seeing a kid like smashing a bottle of champagne, in the VIP, and he was like, "The hell is a kid doing at the club in the first place?" And he over there getting drunk, and it was Usher.
Yes.
And he's like, well, how this kid allowed that? And then he found out, okay, so he's staying with Puff. That unto itself, take sex out of it, that unto itself is problematic.
L.A. Reid once said they had to get him away from Puffy. He had sent him up there thinking one thing, and then he seen where it was headed, and he brought him back. Because he was one of the artists under L.A. Reid at the time. Puffy better hope Sammy's not broke. But if he is, maybe Sammy will come out the woodwork. But a lot of statements. Now you got 52. You got 50 throwing on top where 50 saying Puffy wanted to take him shopping and buy him clothes. And these things that Puffy says sometimes is coming back and it's haunting him, like Fabulous. He really wanted to party with Fabulous. And he said, party with you? He said, no, I really want to party with you. And then he's having somebody a man call him daddy. And these type of things.
And these accounts have been floating out there for a minute.
Yes.
And these are firsthand accounts that Mark's talking about. I mean, these are the artists themselves saying on interviews, that this is what's being said. I'm going to go back to another comment from Facebook from Kay Lynn, and it touches on what you said about Cassie and sticking with somebody even when you know the truth. Kay Lynn says, allegedly, and only my opinion, although some of the memes, GIFs, however you say it, and jokes are funny, it's also mean. However, I won't lie, as I too have laughed at some of them. Pray for me. I'm sticking to Puffy is innocent until proven guilty. But here's the point. I do know one thing, though. If he was involved in trafficking and Cassie knew all of this years ago, she should have reported him back then. Cassie shook the boat, took a settlement, and now it appears to me that she wants to ruin him, which in my mind, she should go down with him if this is all true based on what I've read. This means that she being Cassie, allegedly held on to, knowing that her dude or ex-dude was trafficking minors and allegedly involved in other illegal activities involving minor, and that she is just now reporting this. In my mind, I'm thinking, nah, boo-boo kitty, you got to go too. In any case, I feel sorry for the minors and others who were allegedly trafficked. They deserve peace. And so, Kaylin from Facebook brings up a legitimate point. If Cassie knew that all of this was going down, now we're going into, and all of this is still allegedly. You'll get tired of hearing that word. But now we're going into the Ghislaine Maxwell type conversation. Okay?
Yes.
Epstein is one thing. Okay, Ghislaine, you knew what time it was. You knew what he was doing. Whether you helped or not, you knew what was going on. And so at first, Epstein was being made to pay for his crime, or at least being held accountable. But Maxwell got roped in at some point as well for that very reason. Like, you can't know what's going on and just be in the background like, man, that was jacked up. You knew.
With some very powerful people.
With some very powerful people.
That goes to the throne over Great Britain. So Andrew, I believe his name is.
Mm-hmm.
And first he was denying that he even knew this lady. And then next came the picture. And then whoops. So how far this goes, because again, those parties that we heard about and admired at one time, the white party that was going on in the Hamptons, Luke is saying there was the party and then there was the after party. I mean, like, you have all these people saying these things now, and I guess it was rumored, but at the time, those were the times. And we're talking about, if you go to New York and you start talking about Studio 54, the history of it and what they were doing, and yeah, we could look at it in today's eyes, but they got it. They had the wink to it. And I really believe that what we have here is a case of groupies. And now these people are saying that they were used, exploited, and they were harmed. And the avenue now is, I didn't know. I wasn't responsible for these actions. And again, I think they was romanticized a long time ago. I remember when at Jackson State homecoming, Run DMC came to the yard for homecoming, and we escorted Jam Master Jay, and women were throwing themselves at him. And I was shocked. The same person that had to study with me, I can't go out, I got to study. They was in the hotel lobby and on the bus and I don't even want to tell what went on in the bus right there, because I was kind of like unofficial security for them.
Yeah.
And I saw it. So when you see these things and you see none of them were forced. None of them.
No.
And then you say, well, geez, years later you might hear what went on. Because back then when Run was like that, I believe Run caught a case in Cleveland. Like these things.
Oh, it never fails.
Yes.
Tupac, Mike Tyson, it never fails.
Yes.
At some point, it comes back around. You know, I'm going to look at this timeline, and Prince Andrew, how ironic is it that Prince Andrew is on the photos with Epstein, and now we have the new scandal that they're comparing to Epstein, and his nephew Harry is in those photos.
Yes.
With P. Diddy.
Yes.
So he's at some of these parties. Which ones, I don't know. You know, but the timeline, November 16, 2023, Cassie files her lawsuit. This is all from Billboard.com. They kind of break down the key timeline benchmarks so that you can kind of follow along. November 17, 2023, Cassie and Combs agree to settle. November 23rd, 2023, Combs accused of sexual assault and drugging in early 90s incidents. So you people are starting to become emboldened after Cassie's situation is resolved. November 28th, 2023, he steps down as Revolt's chairman. And so much like Trump has Truth Social, he had Revolt TV. And the thing I hate about all of this, you know, Puffy's Vote or Die campaign was very successful.
Yes.
And we're at a time right now where we need that kind of energy from an election standpoint. But Revolt TV has played a huge role in trying to inform the public to get involved with what's going on around us in a civic perspective. December 6, 2023, Combs denies all allegations after fourth lawsuit is filed. People are becoming more and more bold. December 10th, 2023, Brand severed ties with his e-commerce company. Now you got people that's in his corner monetarily starting to jump ship. December 13th, 2023. Hulu scraps Combs' family reality show plans. Yep. The bleeding continues. February 26, 2024. Music producer sues Combs.
Yes.
And that one names like Cuba Gooding Jr. in that.
Yes.
And that Young Miami was named in that. And so, again, more this is feeling like the Me Too movement a little bit. Don't get me wrong.
A lot of people are saying he's the one that's singing right now because he's the last one in these houses.
That's right.
Or what have you. And he gave a vivid description of what was going on in the house.
He did. March 25th, 2024, federal agents raid his L.A. and Miami homes. March 26th, 2024, Combs reportedly sells his stake in Revolt TV. March 26th, 2024, attorney slams witch hunt raids. The 25th of March, alleged associate arrested on drug charges in Miami. Can we talk about the associates, man? Brendan Paul, who in the hell is this kid? Who in the hell is this kid?
Hang on, probably. I thought one of them was a basketball player.
He played basketball for I happen to have a little bit of information here. He played basketball for Syracuse, and he was arrested in Miami Airport. And when he was arrested, he's a 25-year-old basketball player from Ohio, amateur music producer, graduate of Fairmont State University in West Virginia, being accused of being Diddy's drug mule and his employee, and a federal lawsuit filed against the rap mogul. And so this kid is originally from Shaker Heights, Ohio, resides in the state, according to a police report, which lists his current address in Chagrin Falls near Cleveland. He's not far from here. Mm-hmm. Lives with his parents, Kurt and Mary Jo, inside their 829,000 square foot home. This dude attended a private boarding school in New England, Brewster Academy, for the first 3 years of high school before transferring to Hawken High, another private day school in Ohio, for his senior year. And what was that? What was the dude's name, man, who played in it? He was a real corny looking young white guy. He played in this movie, man, where he was supposed to be hardcore. His name is on the tip of my tongue, man. Skinny dude. You know who I'm talking about.
Yes,
It'll come to me in a second. Because that's who this, I'm not trying to be disparaging. That's who this kid reminds me. If you have not seen this young man, Brendan Paul, go online and take a look at him. And all jokes aside, he is the last person you would ever associate with P. Diddy. But let me go back to it. So this is then he transfers to Hawken High, a private day school in Ohio. Went to Syracuse University in New York for his freshman and sophomore years. Played basketball there. Played Division I ball from 2018 to 2020 before transferring to a Division II program. Played an average of 10 minutes a game, yada, yada, yada. His basketball career didn't take off, so he became an amateur music producer during the pandemic. In a Facebook post in 2020, he said he started making beats from his laptop, and he eventually began to produce for Diddy on the Love album, which was released in September. And so following Diddy's arrest, Paul's arrest, Diddy was stressfully pacing back and forth, blah, blah, blah. And so what it's saying about this young man is he was the person who would carry the firearm. All of this is allegedly. And allegedly, he was the person that would carry the firearm, when he was in Diddy's presence.
They saying liquid cocaine.
And was also
the drug mule.
The drug mule. When he was arrested, he had, let's see, what did he have on him? Brendan Paul was booked on two separate charges, one count of possession of suspected cocaine, another possession of suspected marijuana candy. And so one can only speculate how in the hell he landed in Puff's stratosphere. How does that happen?
Well, again, most of the time in the music industries, you kind of constantly looking for the next one, the new one. Let's go back to the young Kanye. How young Kanye, on just a belief, felt like he was going to go to New York and just start, and he did it. I mean, I'm not going to say he was a nobody in Chicago, but New York didn't know him, and he ended up amongst those type of people. And don't forget, you got white Scott Scorchers out there. You got those type of individuals, but also, remember, like the FBI probably will try to go to, or the feds, they'll go to the weakest link. This guy don't want to do no time. And so you cuff him and see what he got to say. Because he's really on a private plane. He's not even bringing it on like a United or a Delta or anything like that. He's on a private jet. So they said that's probably the reason why they tried to cuff Puffy's kids, to see if you could break them. It was an intimidation type tactic.
That's
to
one
see
way
if
of doing it.
They could talk, because they couldn't search them. They said that they had to. They cuffed them for quote unquote their own protection. They didn't have a body warrant. When you search an individual like that in these type of raids, you have to have a warrant or suspicion that these kids had something on their person, which they did. So they cuffed them to get them just to a little psychology type thing on playing a psychological game. And I think that's what this is right here. They're waiting to see what this guy says.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I want to clear up is supposedly Puff was already on some undisclosed island with no extradition. Once he found out about all of this, that was not the case. Combs was actually found at an pacing outside of a Miami airport and was on his way to the Bahamas to supposedly celebrate his twin daughter's spring break. There is some speculation, though, that Diddy had somewhat of an understanding that something was looming, hence the giving back of the masters, for all of these artists. There's footage being circulated on social media saying, you look at some of these events leading up to it, he looks real nervous and things along those lines, just kind of anxious to see what comes out of this. When I go back to that timeline from February, it says music producer sues Combs. I want to read that account because that is a huge reason that this is problematic for him. Guy's name is Rodney, quote unquote, Lil Rod Jones Jr., the music producer who filed a lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs. This is from a USA Today article. Last month has officially accused Cuba Gooding Jr. of sexual assault, naming him as a defendant in his complaint amended Monday. And so he's throwing him in it as well. The civil lawsuit filed in the New York Federal District Court came hours after Homeland Security investigations agents raided two of Combs' homes. And so he had already filed against P. Diddy.
Yes.
The raid happens. He's like, well, hell, let me go back and issue, add Cuba Gooding Jr. to the complaint. He names Gooding, 56, in his February lawsuit, accusing the actor of sexually harassing and assaulting him on a yacht rented by Combs in the U.S. Virgin Islands in January of 23. And it goes on. It says, according to the lawsuit, Combs attempted to pass off Jones to Gooding, introducing him to the Oscar-winning actor and leaving the two alone in a studio on Combs' yacht. It says Cuba Gooding Jr. began, allegedly, Cuba Gooding Jr. began touching, groping, and fondling Mr. Jones's legs, his upper inner thighs, near his groin, the small of his back, near his buttocks, and his shoulders, all of which Jones's lawsuit alleges. This goes back to what I said earlier with the writer Torre, who is a mainstream writer. Here you have a mainstream actor that is pulled into the fray. And once this becomes legal, I can almost assure you that his attorney is going to be like, we are worried about your ass and your ass alone.
Yeah.
Okay. Which means if it looks bad for Diddy in our defense, it is what it is. Yes. And this is what happens when you start tying other people's careers to your actions. People, just like Cassie said, listen, at the end of the day, I got my situation. She represented her situation.
Yes.
Lil Rod represented his situation. Everybody is going to do what's in their best interest. And if other people's careers are hanging in the balance over this, you got them pulling J-Lo back into some of these accounts.
Well, let's look at that. And then now I'm pretty sure Shine might have something to say on this. And so you along the way, you're going to make some enemies on your way to success. And Puffy's time is he's on the clock.
Right.
And we'll see how he deals with this situation.
Yeah. Monique Sands from Facebook says he needs to get his affairs in order to put the homes and money he still has and set those children up correctly, especially those little girls who have already experienced tragedy, losing their mom. Amen to that. And will likely see their father go to jail. Well, again, we shall see. They don't get clearance to raid your home at the level that they did unless there's enough evidence. You talked about that earlier. You got to get a judge to sign off on it. And there has to be something there. She goes on to say in this post, I am no saint and I don't sin like him. I don't agree with the stuff that has happened. If all the accusations are true, if it were my daughter, I would have wanted to do some things I wouldn't say here, hoping there is healing for those who may suffered. And people see this as having money doesn't allow you to just treat people any way you see fit. As my family says, every dog has their day. The theme of people with money assuming that they will get away with this is a legitimate theme. But Mark, listen, we can debate this one on the way out the door, because I just sat down and watched this one the other day. And when I saw the post, I said, I got to read this, because this dude's story. Nicole Renee has a photo of P. Diddy, and over the photo of P. Diddy, it is a photo of Dan Schneider of Nickelodeon fame, who not only produced but created all of these hit shows for Nickelodeon. It says raiding Diddy house, but not Dan Schneider house is crazy. And I don't know if you've watched this documentary on Dan Schneider and Nickelodeon. I got up the other morning, and this was probably just a week ago, at maybe 4 o'clock in the morning. Couldn't get back to sleep. And so I went out in the living room, grabbed my blanket as I normally do, and scrolled to find something on television. And lo and behold, I find this documentary. And man, did you see it, Mark?
No, I didn't see this yet.
Man, it is the darkest documentary. And I remember some of this stuff from these Nickelodeon shows, and a lot of stuff I didn't remember. It was called Quiet on the Set. And it gives you some harrowing accounts, man. And when I watched it, I did wonder, man, how did he not get swept up in the Me Too dragnet, the Epstein type? This, you got to watch it. And if you're listening, if you have not watched this documentary, you really need to go back and watch it. It begs a lot of questions. It really brings to the foreground the notion of powerful people in Hollywood far too often are having accounts like this levied at them. And when the evidence comes out, oftentimes you're like, man, it's more than just a boys club, like the Me Too movement said. There may be something more sinister going on in the background.
Social media has made it hard to cover things up. Things can go, again, Bill Cosby. What was the guy named Hannibal? Was a comedian.
Yeah.
Those accusations has been out there. Bill had already testified. That was the curious thing about Bill's thing. He had already said it and allegedly made a deal. Not allegedly, he made a deal. Whatever he said in this testimony couldn't be used against him. Mm-hmm. And they went back on their word years later, almost a decade later probably, and offered this one joke. It was one joke
from a C-list comedian, Hannibal Buress.
There we go. Yep. So what this could lead to, it seems like if things can gain traction, it could go there if it gains the traction. Yep. With Michael Jackson, the whole optics of it was like, okay, Michael Jackson took Oprah into his home in Neverland and showed you the bedrooms of the children and shows you in the backyard they had a movie theater, and it was all like, Michael was like, we watch movies and we spend the night, we have pajama parties and all these things. And it was like, oh, it was cute. It was Mike loves the children.
Until
he brings busloads of kids from South Central over there and have rides and all these things. And this is Michael Jackson's work. He said, when they brought sex into it, it made it sinister. It made it. He said all these things. What he was doing. He never said anything about grooming or anything like that. He said this is what it was and then people believed it prior to. And I'm of the belief. I don't believe Michael Jackson molested a child. I don't. Now I know he won the trial or what have you. He wasn't found guilty of doing that, and I do know that. So what I'm saying is a story that went from Michael loves the kids with a little hint of scandal went to he's a molester. He did something or what have you. And nothing really changed about what he did. When it was Heal the World, when it was We Are the World, or whatever it was Mike, if anybody loved children and children loved him, it was Michael Jackson. And look what's happened. R. Kelly, that was going on for years. R. Kelly was living a freaknik life. And now if you look at freaknik, I mean, they saying some charges might be filed by this documentary. You watch it, and then now you have series like Surviving R. Kelly.
Yeah, which was deep.
Which was, you have all these people. But you had grown women flying that left their job to be with R. Kelly, and it was okay. He was taking them shopping, and he was doing these things, and they was with it. Not one time did they say he chained me. He forced me. It was the things that he was doing. Versus now, I'm not getting into the Aaliyah thing, the underage thing. That was weird. I don't get into 15-year-olds or however old Aaliyah was. But remember, Aaliyah's parents was right there.
Yeah.
Sparkle. If it was Sparkle's niece,
Aaliyah, yeah, it was
whatever, Sparkle's right there. So a lot of people are kind of guilty of in this. It's just not the artists themselves, or it's just a sticky situation here, man.
When powerful people get busted for stuff like this, or when they skate by, you start to feel, at least I start to feel like in the backdrop, there are some things going on that lends itself to you becoming a sacrificial lamb. I'm of the mindset, I think a lot of Americans are of the mindset of when you're playing ball at a certain level financially, you are not dealing with the Marcus Atkinsons and the Mark Blunts, and this is a whole other world.
Yes.
And all of the money is connected. As I read that timeline, as I read that timeline earlier, and you started to see these large companies in the backdrop starting to jump ship, at some point, it's like, okay, you're becoming a liability, whether this is true or not to the grand scheme of things. I don't know how much you know about the International Monetary Fund. Their leader at the time was a guy by the name of Dominique Strauss-Kahn. And the International Monetary Fund is something that is heavily tied to the most powerful players in politics, the political elite, the financial elite. Very few people even know about or even have conversations about the International Monetary Fund. And yet on a global level, they are one of very, very few organizations that sets global policy financially. Yes. When their leader was pinched and arrested for allegedly raping or assaulting an African maid in New York, my thought was, dude, who did you piss off? Yeah. Because you had up one of the most powerful, secretive organizations on the planet. Who did you? Somebody in the background is trying to teach you a lesson. At least that's what it feels like. And with this Diddy thing, and you feel like something is going on in the backdrop that we don't know about. And listen, that is all just conjecture, and it's just me having a little soapbox because you can't prove it. But I'm ever conscious of the fact, Mark pointed out the internet. The thing about the internet is some of the things I remember back in the day when the mafia was folklore.
Yes.
Right?
It didn't exist.
It didn't exist. So that's just folklore. There's no secret cabal of Italians that have judges on their payroll and have influence with law enforcement. And now it's so commonly known. We make shows about it and we enjoy it. So some of these little backroom deals and these powerful cabals that people, that doesn't exist. Now it's like, are you certain about that? But all of this it's sad. I'll say that in closing. And, you pray for the victims of all of this, for people that have been completely or genuinely victimized by this, for people that are trying to capitalize on this in an illicit way. Shame on you. And whoever did whatever, justice should be done. And hopefully they can figure out what in the world is going on with this. Mark, any parting shots for this situation?
The word that you used, justice. And justice goes both ways when I say this. If Puffy didn't do anything, I hope he receives justice. Yeah. And if the victims, if there is some victims, I hope they receive justice. So that's where I stand on this, because I wasn't there and I don't know. But I would hope future artists, future business people learn from these things that, you hey, these, whatever you do, it could come back. And whoever you have around you, make sure they deserve to be around you. And whatever you're doing, I hope it's the right thing.
Yeah, yeah. That's an excellent point. And, in closing, in terms of justice can go either way, it could. And let me be clear about this. Here's the one thing I think we've all figured out about P. Diddy, Puffy, Sean Combs, whatever you choose to call him. He's a fighter.
Yes.
If any of this is untrue, I can promise you he is lawyering up and coming after somebody's over this one.
Yes.
Because his reputation from the time he rose to power in this business is he doesn't lay down for anybody, not physically, not in business. He doesn't lay down. And so whatever they got, that was one of the things that came to mind when I saw them with all this force raiding his homes, especially when I heard that his kids were handcuffed. You better have exactly what you think you have, because if you don't, he's coming after you with the kitchen sink.
This is their shot. I don't see him settling anymore. He did it with Cassidy, and I think he thought that was a strategy to make something go away one way or the other.
It didn't work.
It didn't work. Now all monies will be going towards lawyers, and he's fighting everything because he's fighting for his reputation. And if he didn't do nothing, it was well earned. If he has a legacy that's out there that he's trying to protect, hey, we're going to see a hell of a fight. That's the best way I could put it.
Oh, man. And, I said that I was about to leave, but, man, this begs another point. Mm-hmm. Stephen A. Smith made a point about LeBron complaining about all the hate that Bronny was getting from these people on the internet. And Stephen A. Smith was like, Bronny's been a model kid. Your family's been a model family. People are hating on the fact that you've made it clear that you want to play for your son, and people are hating on the fact of the potential deferential treatment that your son will get because of your words, not because of anything that Bronny. All Bronny's is guilty of is being your son with all of this hate. He hadn't done anything. He's been a great young man. I say all that to say this. Christian Combs' entire persona in entertainment is based on his father's image.
Yes, definitely.
His entire persona is P. Diddy Jr.
Definitely.
And so when you talk about legacy, and don't think for 2 seconds, because the one thing that I'm completely convinced of, like I am with LeBron, is that he loves his kids.
Definitely.
And so it goes back to, if there's anything here that is not on point, that's why I said, whatever y'all say y'all got, you better have it, because he's coming at you, because his kids, his family, his legacy, everything he's worked for, it's not just he's done. This rips money from, and if there are people that have been violated, don't get me wrong, it's secondary to that. Don't get me wrong. But this is forever altering the histories and the futures of his children.
Yes.
So, stay tuned. This thing, it's unfortunate on all fronts, man, but this is just a drama that you hate to hear play out. But when we talked about it the first time, to go back to what we said in the beginning, man, there was so much drama in those original court documents. We were saying, if this stuff is true, this has got to turn into a criminal investigation, and here we are.
And I'm gonna point out one more thing before we go, because again, you remember I said it's about traction. There's 2 stories really leaking out there now that you brought up, LeBron. It hasn't gained traction, but they're saying it's a possibility of steroid use, the PEDs. Jason Whitlock did a show on this, and now the right is moving, trying to make that stick, because let's not act like P. Diddy, LeBron, and then let's go to Jay-Z, because somehow now Jay-Z's name is being linked in with the Meek Mills thing or the whatever thing. So these are billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
These are billionaires, and they're flexing. They're not just doing the party thing, although that's what some people believe. They're building schools. Puffy built a school. He had to step down from that, but Puffy had a school in New York, a very successful school. LeBron has a school. Jay-Z is doing law reform.
Mm-hmm.
So now these men, society or the powers that be might feel like, hey, I wouldn't put it past them that we have to deal with these people. And this is just keep your ears out for that.
Yeah. This story is definitely not finished from our perspective, and we'll be circling back to this. Stay tuned for the next installment of Trump and the Blacks. We teased that a while ago. Go back on the timeline, take a listen to that commentary. That show's coming up here within the next 2 weeks, so that we can unpack that. Much like this story, that one is going to be a continued story throughout the foreseeable future. And so at the end of the day, we want you to keep listening, tell a friend, and just stay tuned. But meanwhile, that's it for our show today. You can tune in next time for more discussion and analysis with local and national guests. Remember, the Next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms and on the fourth Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. on WQLN NPR, which is 91.3 FM. And remember, I want to tell you about a new feature. If you want to leave a message, comment, or suggestion for the show, you can call or text the Next hotline at 814-240-8816. We look forward to hearing from you. You can leave your thoughts, comments for guests, what you think we missed, what you want to add to it. It doesn't really matter. We want you to be a part of this show. I'm Marcus Atkinson. I want to thank Mark Blunt for joining us again. Thank you, brother. All right, come and join us again so that you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.
Peace.